What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing an analysis and review of the first episode in Season 3 of the Paramount firefighter drama, Fire Country. And just so you guys know, this video will contain spoilers, so if for some reason you haven't gotten around to watching the episode yet, and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time, let's get into it. So if you've been here with me long enough, and you watch both my short and long form videos, then you know I thought Season 1 of Fire Country was one of the most frustrating watches in recent memory. The writers basically wrote a 22-episode circular arc, with Bodie ending up back in prison after he fought all season to make it from the fire camp back to Gabriella and his friends and his family. But I must admit that Season 2 made up for a lot of the sins of Season 1, being made up of only 10 episodes, and finally having Bodie make parole, but not in time to keep Gabriella from planning a wedding with her new boo, Diego. Now, episode 3.1, entitled What the Bride Said, starts with Bodie standing outside the church where Gabriella is getting married, trying to convince his Uncle Luke, that's funny, if you know, you know, to fast track him into a firefighter program, claiming that he's addicted to firefighting. Now, at the same time, we see Jake sitting in Smokies with Genevieve, and though Rick is there too, I can't think of a single reason, other than narratively speaking, why it makes any sense for them to be there instead of at the chapel at the wedding, seeing as how, you know, again, Gabriella's wedding is happening. And Jake should absolutely be there. Matter of fact, Genevieve should be there dressed nicely, you know, sitting right beside him. But they're at Smokies. I understand why the writers did this. But just in the realm of making the characters feel like they're going through their lives naturally, that the writers don't have their thumbs on the scale, this was absolute ridiculousness. But we'll cross that bridge another day. We next see Manny being driven away from the church in police custody because, as you guys remember, he was arrested in the Season 2 finale. And as the police car travels down the street, he sees a helicopter fly by, flying a banner congratulating Gabriella and Diego on their nuptials. You know, all right. Again, this is done for a specific reason, but, you know, fine. Okay. Meanwhile, inside the church, Gabriella looks around and doesn't see her father, doesn't see Bodie. And she's finally asked by the priest if she takes Diego to be her husband. Now, at that moment, the helicopter malfunctions, because of course it does, crashing into the police car, transporting Manny to jail, right? Because obviously, you know, it does, right? Then it continues flailing until it finally lands on the roof of Smokies nearby, because sure. And finally, the tail rudder of the helicopter crashes through the glass window of the church right before Gabriella can give her answer to the priest, because this is what happens in television shows, network television shows, right? And now that the episode is properly set up, let's talk about how the episode is divided and how it played out. So first of all, just a small thing, but a big thing. It went from day to night quickly, didn't it? Like, they run out of the church and it's still daytime. And by the time they get to Smokies right nearby to start doing the work of the firefighters, it's pitch black outside. But you know, never mind that, right? We'll call the A story here Gabriella dealing with her feelings about Bodie and whether she really wants to marry Diego, right? And the B story is Jake trying to save Genevieve and hoping she doesn't find out that Rick might be her dad in the process, right? And then the C story is going to be Manny dealing with the fact that, you know, he's going to jail and that his firefighter career, it might just be done. Because keep in mind, you know, Manny's been in trouble with the law before. That's how he ended up in charge of 3 Rock. And the runner is going to be Bodie trying to find a way into the firefighter program. And we've already kind of kicked that, you know, that piece of the story off here in the beginning of the episode. Now, again, the A story here in the episode involves Gabriella and Bodie. They're cutting line together at the beginning, him wearing a sport coat and her still wearing her wedding dress. And the pair get into an argument essentially about their relationship and about how, Bodie doesn't want her help, but that she's the one that's a firefighter and all that kind of stuff. And right now he's not. And, then as they're doing that, they find out that the chopper pilot is still stuck inside the chopper, which has landed in the woods nearby. And so the pair take off into the woods to offer him aid. Now, Bodie is injured while they tend to the chopper pilot, and Gabriella provides him with first aid. Because of course she does, right? She's a paramedic, right? Now, Diego eventually shows up, overhearing a conversation that they're having with the injured chopper pilot, who seems to think that Bodie and Gabriella are the couple that was getting married. And, Diego shows up and he decides to give Bodie a hard time about it. I mean, he gives Gabriella a hard time, but he gives Bodie that work. I'm not your homeboy, that kind of energy, right? Now, Diego then gets in an argument with Bodie about how to treat the injured chopper pilot, about intubating him while he's still kind of, turned on his side. And Gabriella eventually sides with Bodie. This is being done for a specific reason. It's the writer showing you that Gabriella's on Bodie's side, given her having a choice, right? And finally, toward the end of the episode, as Gabriella and Bodie sit in the back of an ambulance, her still kind of taping up his injured hand, they finally talk about the wedding, and Gabriella admits out loud that she doesn't want to marry Diego. Duh, right? We all know that she was only marrying Diego because Bodie was unavailable because he got sent back to jail, right? So Diego shows up in the middle of this conversation. Again, my man's got impeccable timing, right? And he asks Gabriella if something happened between her and Bodie recently. Now, Gabriella at that point admits to the kiss, further upsetting Diego. Now, as for the B story, here in the episode, it involves Jake having to stand by inside Smokey's as he waits for the on-duty firefighters to show up with the equipment needed to save Genevieve, and the others, of course. But, he's focused on Genevieve for the most part, right? And they're trapped underneath all the debris from the roof caving in due to the chopper crashing, or at least bouncing off of the roof of Smokey's, right? And we quickly see Rick and Genevieve end up in a conversation as he's trying to kind of keep her calm. And as she talks about her mom, Rick realizes that Genevieve is the little girl he came to town looking for. You remember in the season 2 finale, he tells Jake that, he's in town because he heard that, I think it's Kara, she passed away and that she had a little girl that might be his daughter. So he was there to try to meet his kid or whatever. Right. So he keeps her calm. And he even, makes some parental decisions, right? He pops her shoulder back into place as Jake is standing outside of the debris field. Jake gets a little upset about that, but, he's like, hey, look, I've got 3 kids. I've learned how to pop shoulders back into place, right? And Jake and Eve and eventually Vince work together to save them before the rubble collapses on top of them. And they do get that done. And as Jake rides in the ambulance with Rick, he explains that though he doesn't want to ruin what Jake and Genevieve have, that he wants a paternity test because he wants to know if Genevieve is actually his daughter. So it sounds to me like he's like, look, I'm not trying to take her away from you, but if she's my daughter, I want to be in her life as a father with, living up to my fatherly responsibilities, but I'm not trying to snatch her away from you and you all can't spend no time together, blah, blah, whatever. Right? So, okay, cool. Now, the C story here involves Manny, who was on his way to jail, right? And after the car crashes, the police officers end up having to go to the hospital. And he asked Sharon to uncuff him during the incident so that he can help. And Sharon at first doesn't really want to do it, but she eventually does it, telling him, hey, I did a little bad so you could do some good, so get to it, And so, Sharon, he helps Sharon and Vince, provide aid to the injured parties. And as the episode goes on and the incident seems well in hand, he's approached by some angry police officers asking why he isn't in handcuffs. Now, at that point, Sharon comes to his defense, and eventually so does Luke, which is kind of interesting because remember, he punches Luke at the end of season 2 because Luke was trying to shut down 3 Rock, and so Manny got upset and hit Luke, and that's part of what started this whole mess in the first place about him being arrested and that whole kind of thing, right? And before Manny is transported to jail, having no idea how his arraignment will go exactly, he asks Sharon for a favor. And that favor is to keep Gabrielle and Bodie apart, claiming that they remind him too much of him and his ex-wife. Now, the runner this season will be Bodie trying to get into a firefighter program and work his way towards fighting fires with his family and friends. And again, we got the ball rolling on that as both Bodie and Sharon asked Luke to fast track Bodhi into a program. Bodhi asked at the beginning of the episode, Sharon asked towards the end, right? And, the tag here or the stinger is that as everyone believes that the incident has been contained, an explosion happens due to the chopper leaking gas in the woods where the final wrecking site was, and a massive fire erupts in the woods. So I assume that when we get to episode 2, that's what we're going to be dealing with. So I wonder if episode 2 is going to be another set piece, where the whole episode takes place in the woods with them fighting a fire. Now, look, this episode was one big set piece, as I was saying, and I'm fine with that. I don't know that I would be all right with episode 2 being a set piece as well in the same location, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, right? But the unlikely separation of characters here in order to force these stories to kind of take off is what I take issue with, and what I typically take issue with in network TV writing as a whole, right? I just think that there were more creative ways to present these stories that will compel the audience to tune in on a weekly basis, wherein you can portray these things as kind of happening a little more naturally, right? The idea that a chopper flying a banner for Gabriella's wedding, of all things, was the very thing that caused her wedding to come to a close, and that chopper crashed or dumped debris on both the transport taking Manny to jail, Smokey's, where Jake happened to be with Gabriella, and crashed through the window of the church, creating an environment where Gabriella doesn't have to answer the question, of whether or not she wants to marry Diego. I'm like, man, that's just a lot to kind of dump in one episode. Like, the chances of something like that happening are like, what, 0.1%? Something like it. That's crazy, right? Now, as for the storylines to watch this season, it's clearly whether Bodhi will indeed get into a firefighter program, which I think he will. Otherwise, what the hell is the point of continuing the show, right? It's called Fire Country, right? So eventually Bodhi's going to have to be in a position to fight fires. And so we assume that he will get into a program. Now, we'll also be keeping an eye on Bodhi and Gabriella. And here I think it's 50-50 or whether they'll get together this season. I think they will flirt with getting together. I personally think there will probably be some new female that gets introduced into the cast that will catch Bodhi's interest. And now it will be Gabriella's turn to be jealous all season. I mean, I believe that just because she doesn't look like she'll be marrying Diego doesn't mean that Bodhi owes it to her to simply step into his shoes and become her husband. That's the way I see it, right? And of course, network TV writers do these kinds of things to keep the interest ginned up. So I absolutely think some new girl will show up, some woman, will show up. Bodhi will like her, and then Gabrielle will have to stand by because Diego won't want nothing to do with her after what took place in this episode. But Gabriella will have to stand by and then be mad, like Bodhi was mad all season 2. Now, I think Rick is indeed Genevieve's dad, because if he isn't, this would now be the second man the show has brought up that might be her dad. And, I didn't like them floating the idea that Bodhi was her dad last season as a plot device. If they did it again, I would be beside myself. Real talk. I'm not even joking. Right. And plus, Kara had said in season 2 that there was only one other man that it could possibly be. So I'm going to take her at her word that she's not, out here just passing out vajayjay all over the place, and that, Rick is her dad. And I think that seeing the dynamic between Rick and Jake and Genevieve will be interesting this season. I am interested to see how that goes. And finally, my man Manny might be in for a long season, y'all. One where he might be forced to spend quite a bit of time away from Gabriella and his firefighter comrades. Now, we'll have to see how all that works out. Because, the writers could go a number of different ways. They could make this a quick and easy thing and bring him back, which if they do that, I kind of go, that makes, what happened toward the end of season 2, not, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I think that Manny, if I had to guess, I think that Manny's probably going to spend some time away. And especially because he's asking Sharon, hey, look out for Gabriella, make sure you keep them apart, right? Which means that they're absolutely going to be messing around, hooking up something. But I do still think like a third party will come in that'll get Bodhi's attention, and we'll just kind of see how it all turns out. Now, overall, I'd give the episode a 75% or a 7.5 if you're thinking IMDb score. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I was prepared to give it a lower score, but I think that Gabriella cleaned up the mess that the writers created at the beginning of the episode all right, so I'm not going to eat their lunch for it, right? But I thought the episode was overly contrived, even though it set our main characters up for an interesting season, like I said, especially with Bodhi, Gabriella, and Jake. Now, again, I'm not a fan of most network television, especially most network television in the past, like, say, decade or so, mainly because the story beats tend to be overly melodramatic, almost like soap opera-like at times. And I've hated soap opera since I was a kid. I also think that the writing tends to routinely insult the intelligence of the audience, pointing out things in the dialogue that we can clearly see happening on the screen. And one of those writer rules is you show, you don't tell, right? But they're constantly telling you what's happening instead of letting you just watch the show and see what's happening for yourself. And last but not least, the dialogue can be more cringy at times than the final scene in a rom-com. And we all know how cringy those scenes are in rom-coms where the guy has to profess his love at the end and then they kiss. Like, nothing that's ever said in that scene is ever good. You're like, oh my God, that was so bad. But, I think I'll have to wait and see how some of these season arcs resolve themselves before I can give a true opinion on whether this season of Fire Country will be more season 1 or more season 2. But what do you guys think? Did you like the first episode of season 3 of Fire Country? If so, what was your favorite part of the story? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. You can also now support my channel by leaving a super thanks. If you should be so inclined, I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, be sure to go and check out themaskscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.